Thousands of civilians, meanwhile, trapped by Russian forces, escaped Ukraine's war zone. This is the scene just west of Kyiv in Irpin. Armed Ukrainians helping the injured and elderly get out of the region safely. It's only one of the cities, though, being heavily targeted by Russian airstrikes. Partial and precarious ceasefires took effect in a number of areas today. Ukraine is accusing Russia of shelling the southern humanitarian corridor leading out of Mariupol. The situation is dire inside that port city. Some 300,000 people are stuck there, surrounded by Russian forces. There is no running water, no power, no sanitation, and food and clean drinking water are running extremely low. Andrii Bukvych is the charge d'affaires at the Ukrainian embassy here in Ottawa. He's Ukraine's representative in Canada. Mr. Bukvych, good to see you again. Thank you very much for making the time.
Thank you for having me, Vashi. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you. How are you? More importantly, let me start off with a portion of the interview that we just aired from my colleague Travis, who is traveling with the Prime Minister, with NATO's Secretary General, who continues to draw a very hard line in the sand about whether or not NATO will intervene in any military capacity. Your thoughts on that?
Well, let's admit, NATO has already engaged. We are getting tremendous support from our partners, including NATO members, in terms of arms, defensive weapons, military equipment, humanitarian aid, and this is very important. We have new requests, and there is a reason for that. We need air fighters, we need shelter our skies, because what Russia is doing now in Ukraine, all over the cities, they use the same tactics as in Syria. Airstrikes on Ukrainian cities, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Sumy. So it's half-ton bombs are falling on houses, neighborhoods, women and children. Ukrainian cities are being nearly destroyed by Russians. House by house, block by block, they aim to erase Kyiv, Kharkiv, Sumy, Mariupol. This is absolutely inhuman.
It sounds like there is a process underway to ensure that Ukraine does get the air capacity to fight back against what you just described, vis-a-vis, for example, Poland lending a number of those jets to the U.S., who would then lend them to Ukraine, and it would backstop the Polish vulnerability there. Can you update us on the latest information you have about the possibility of that happening?
Well, we actively working with our partners, with Warsaw and with Washington, D.C., because it seems that Poland is the most quickest way to get these fighters to Ukraine so that Ukrainian pilots can protect civilians from these cynical attacks. I know that there are some progress, some developments on this track, but we have to wait for final confirmation. At the same time, I have to tell you that we understand, NATO should understand the importance of this. One of the major commodities Russia is selling, or rather Kremlin is selling to the world, is not so oil and gas, it's fear. And they're directly threatening Poland that there will be outcomes, there will be punishment for their brave decision to provide us with air fighters. And West should stay united and demonstrate that there is no fear. And support of Ukraine will stop Putin in Ukraine. We are prevailing. We need means to protect civilians, but we will definitely win Putin in Ukraine, and we will stop him there.
Mr. Bukvych, do you see what you just described, this sort of supply of fighter jets through the U.S. and Poland? Do you see that as an alternative, an acceptable alternative to what you and other Ukrainian officials have more specifically asked for, which is the designation of the airspace above Ukraine as a no-fly zone?
But so far, together with all that military support we are getting, and we are very thankful to our partners for that support, we have two major requests. It's not so to strengthen or defend our armed forces. It's to defend our civilians, Ukrainian women and children in the first place. So we need to have, we have to close skies over Ukraine, or at least a part of Ukraine, where there are civilians looking shelter and escaping, evacuating from encircled cities. we need a protected sky in western Ukraine, and we need these air fighters. Today, I was struck by a story when in city of Mariupol, for the first time in decades, a child died of dehydration. Tanya, a girl, was only 6 years old. She and her mother were trapped under the collapsed building ruined by Russian pilots. Her mother died. In last hours, the girl was alone, scared, hungry, and thirsty. She could have survived if Russians would let civilians to leave the city, what they want. And by the time the rescuers released her from debris, she died of dehydration. If Ukrainian pilots would have fighters, if we would have air defense system, we would protect that girl. We would protect our cities. So I would ask on behalf of Ukrainian people, on behalf of Ukrainian president, to make necessary decision faster. We need these fighters and sheltered sky ASAP, as soon as possible. Otherwise, the cost will be calculated by thousands of civilians.
You know, against the backdrop of what you're talking about, the big decision or big announcement that was made today was around sanctioning or banning the imports of Russian oil to the United States, not to Europe, to the United States. Do you have any sense that Europe is in any way prepared to follow suit anytime soon?
Well, first of all, I have to mention that it was Canada was the first that imposed sanctions that banned import of Russian oil and oil products. And now the US, a very important consumer of Russian oil, joined these sanctions. This is very important. And though this decision could have been taken earlier, it is very important. It's a sign of solidarity. It's a sign that we, the West, are moving in the right direction. And I hope that our European partners would understand how serious and severe situation in Ukraine is and will join this decision. I know that UK also is considering, and they promised to ban Russian oil import by the end of this year, and hopefully other European countries will join this decision. And it would be very important sign of solidarity, and these decisions would fundamentally undermine the resources of Putin he uses to unleash this aggressive foreign policy and wage war.
Okay, Mr. Bukvych, thank you very much for making the time for our program. As always, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Vashi.
Andrii Bukvych is the chargé d'affaires at the Ukrainian embassy here in Ottawa. He's Ukraine's representative in Canada. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.